Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will give about 1 more minute. We still have a number of people logging in, so we'll give them a chance to get logged in, and then we will get going. Okay, actually it looks like the logging in has slowed down, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, I'm Kim Brown with the Montana Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center, also known as the Pre-ETS TAC, and I will be your moderator for today. This webinar is sponsored by the Montana Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center and is funded in whole or in part under a contract with the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. The statements shared in the presentation do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the department. All of the attendees are currently muted. If you want to ask our presenter a question or make a comment, please type your question or comment into the chat box, and only you, the moderator, myself, and the presenter will be able to see what you've typed into the chat box. But if it's a question for the presenter, I will read it out loud so that she'll be able to answer for all of the audience members to hear. And you're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation. Our presenter today will stop several times and see if anybody has any questions, and then I can read those out to her. For those of you who requested Montana Office of Public Instruction renewal units when you registered, those will be emailed to you after the webinar, and it can take a couple of weeks to get those sent out. Please note that you do have to have pre-registered in order to receive the OPI credit, and unfortunately we're unable to issue other kinds of attendance documentation. Today's session is being audio taped for the Pre-ETS Resource Library, and we'll let you know at some point in the future where those recordings will be housed. They'll be somewhere on the VR, or the Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services website, but I don't have the exact URL or website address for you today. So as soon as we know that, we'll get that information out to all of the Pre-ETS listserv members. The slides and handouts for today's webinar are posted in the handouts section on your screen. So if you look to the upper right-hand section of your computer screen, you'll either see a box that's already open that includes the chat or question section and a box that says handouts. If you don't see that box to the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a small arrow, and if you click on that arrow, it will open the box so that you can see the chat and question section, and you can see the handout section. And again, under handouts, we have the handouts for today as well as the PowerPoint slides if you're interested in downloading those. As you sign out of the webinar today, a survey will pop up, and we do ask that you take the time to answer those survey questions. It's quite short, I think about 8 questions, but we read through all of the survey responses and we use those to help plan future training sessions and also to improve the training that we're offering. So please take the time to fill out that survey when it pops up. And with that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. We're very fortunate to have with us Ellen Condon. Ellen is the director of the Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center. She's also the director of the Transition and Employment Projects and the Montana Deaf-Blind Project at the University of Montana's Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities. Ellen has worked for the Rural Institute since 1996 on transition and employment for youth with significant disabilities. She is also a consultant with Mark Gold and Associates, and she serves as a subject matter expert for the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor on the Employment First State Leadership Mentor Project. Ellen has worked in the field of developmental disabilities since 1986. Prior to coming to Montana, her experiences included hands-on service delivery, program development, and program management in community, residential, and supported employment programs. And with that, I would like to turn over our presentation for today to Ellen. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you, Kim. I'm just going to call up my screen here. Oops. Okay. All All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us. And today we're going to be talking about a new opportunity about Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and also what's going on in Montana with Pre-ETS, the Pre-Employment Transition Services. And basically this is a really exciting time, but it's also kind of a confusing time. And so bear with us meaning the Pre-ETS TAC as well as Voca Rehab, in figuring out how Pre-ETS work, how we work with the schools, and how we can serve students with disabilities to have better outcomes of employment and career readiness and entrance into post-secondary ed after high school. And the reason that we don't have all the answers is that this was just signed. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act just was signed by President Obama in July 2014. Why we don't all know all of the rules and how it all works yet is that they haven't been published and they haven't been decided upon. We're expecting the regulations about Pre-ETS and WIOA to be released sometime in June or July of this year. And so if we don't always have the answers, part of that is why. So please bear with us, but we want you to be excited about this is a great opportunity for schools to expand what they've already been doing and think about, are there ways that they'd like to better serve their students by having some additional resources and support from Voca Rehab and also through the TAC. Our Pre-Employment Transition Services TAC is funded by a contract with Voca Rehab, and I will share with you more information about who are the TAC members, where we're located, and what we can do for you.
And Ellen, sorry to interrupt, but if you're not able to bring your slides up, you can just turn the presenter back over to me and I can run through the slides for you.
That's okay. So are they sharing now?
Now they are, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. Okay. So basically, WIOA is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And what this does, what this act did, is it reauthorizes all the rules and kind of the direction to Voca Rehab centers nationally. This isn't just Montana. The whole country is now doing things really different, as well as workforce centers. Voca Rehab is only one of the players of the workforce centers. But the whole purpose behind the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is to focus more on preparing our young people with disabilities to be college and career ready. And one of the really big things that makes this different is that basically is that we're starting a lot earlier. Like if you think about when Voca Rehab typically was reaching out to schools, even though Voca Rehab counselors have been in schools for a number of years now, they hadn't been working directly with students until they were closer to exit. And now the direction by WIOA is that we start early. So when we're talking about students that are eligible for pre-employment transition services, we're talking about students with disabilities who are 15 turning 16 in that school year. So there's a whole lot more collaboration potential for Voca Rehab and schools because Voca Rehab's allowed to start a lot earlier these days. The other piece is that with WIOA, there's a huge focus on looking at the possibility of community employment for everybody. So instead of kind of weeding out some folks with significant disabilities and thinking, well, maybe they're not quite ready because they're not very competitive, so thinking possibly they'd go to a more sheltered setting to get ready, what WIOA is really pushing and directing us all to do is to think about the possibility of community employment for all those kids. And so instead of thinking that people might not be ready to compete, instead what we need to do is make sure that we're looking at pre-employment transition services for our entire population of kids with disabilities. So kids who traditionally haven't had a lot of community-based work experience in high school, we need to look at those students, so students who are probably receiving like a life skills curriculum. We need to be looking at students with learning disabilities and students with emotional disabilities. So the folks who are eligible for Pre-ETS services are kids who have an IEP, who have a 504 plan, or students who have a disability and may qualify for Voca Rehab. Students do not need to be enrolled with Voca Rehab to receive the Pre-ETS services. The other piece that's directed by WIOA is that there's 5 required activities that need to be provided for students. And again, I'm saying students because that's another requirement for the people who are getting pre-employment transition services funded through a contract from Voca Rehab in the schools. They have to be students. So there's 5 required areas, and we're going to go much more in depth on this. But think about all the different pieces that when you and I were in high school, or when some of your students who have disabilities, think about all the areas that we need to tap into to get them really ready to function in a competitive integrated workplace, or at college, or at trade schools, or in an apprenticeship program to become an electrician or whatever else they want to do. So in order to really look at, how do we prepare students for what they want to do after school, they need some help exploring what's out there. What are industries that are hot in Montana right now? Or, what's available in the Deer Lodge community? Who are the employers that are hiring? What kind of skills do they require? What kind of training do they require? And the other piece is for students to get a handle on what are they really good at? What types of jobs and careers are going to work for them? So in job exploration counseling, we're going to look at what's available in the community and also look at what are their aptitudes, what are their interests, what kind of training are they going to need to get, and what kind of experiences are they going to need to participate in to get ready for those careers that they choose. We also want students to have a lot more hands-on work experience before they leave high school. So that might be participating in a variety of jobs in school, but also we really want students out in the community. And that can be paid, it can be unpaid, it can be an apprenticeship program, or it could be a pre-apprenticeship program. It could be connecting with employers in the community for some mentoring experiences. But we want hands-on experience that really accompanies the academic skills and that pathway from, to really augment that pathway from high school to employment or post-secondary ed, which then results in employment. So as we're talking about post-secondary ed, are we exploring what's out there? Not everybody wants to go or needs to go to a 4-year university. So what's out there for college? What's out there for apprenticeship programs? What's out there for trade schools? What about Job Corps? The other piece we want to look at is, in addition to having experiences, students really need to know what the world of work's about. So are we looking at soft skills? Are we teaching people to self-monitor their attendance and their timeliness? How do they talk about what they need for accommodations? Or how do they negotiate a day off? All of that would come under workplace readiness training. Anything that your individual student needs to get more prepared to work. The final area is instruction and self-advocacy. And so think about, what does this person need to know about their disability, about their impact of disability, meaning If I've got a print disability and I'm required to do some reading at work, how do I talk to my employer about how my disability impacts how I would do the job? Ideally, in high school, we're exposing students to different strategies and possibly technology that's going to help them overcome or compensate for their disability. And so if they can go to their employer and say, look, I use my laptop or my phone with this software, and that helps me better understand written information, and I'm better at typing responses versus handwriting them, they're gonna look more competent and prepared when they get to work. So again, who are we talking about for pre-employment transition services? We're talking about students with disabilities. And so they may have an IEP or 504 plan, or they may not, but they've got to still be in high school. And so it's students turning 16 in the school year through age 21, as long as they're still enrolled in high school. If they are now attending college or community college, they're no longer eligible for pre-employment transition services. These are just for students still enrolled in high school. However, Voc Rehab still can serve students as they leave high school, and also they can provide individual case services in addition to these pre-ETS. And if people, I'm not quite sure who's on the phone in terms of schools. So if you're already, if your school isn't in a contract with Voc Rehab yet to provide pre-ETS, or you've got some questions about how that all works, those are valid questions to type into the chat room as well. In Montana, well actually nationally, all Voc Rehab offices have been directed to spend 15% of their budget on pre-ETS services, so targeting students with disabilities in schools. How Montana has chosen to do this is, in addition to enrolling students earlier through their case services, where you become determined eligible for Voc Rehab and you have an IPE, in addition to that, Voc Rehab is offering funding to schools across Montana. And basically what you do is you say that you want to provide pre-employment transition services in these 5 areas, and you enter into a contract with Voc Rehab. And then you create a work plan. So what is your school going to do in these 5 areas? Voc Rehab can help you with that, and also the TAC can help you with that. So it doesn't have to be that complicated to get started. Then what happens is, at the end of each quarter, after you have a work plan and a signed contract, you will bill Voc Rehab for the students you served in the various pre-employment transition services activities. And there's a fee scale. So based on the number of students you served, you will then get a check from Voc Rehab. This money can be used for anything to build your pre-ETS program. It should be related to what's in your work plan. And so I'll give you some additional examples of what people are doing. So for job exploration counseling, you could, say in a small rural community, you could go out and meet employers in your area and have your students interview them about how did they get into this business, who are they looking for in terms of employees, what kind of training do employees get, what's the starting wage, how do you get increases there. You could also work with your students accessing some interest inventories and aptitudes, and aptitude evaluations, looking at what are they good at. We have a long list that's continually growing of different interest inventories and aptitudes and career assessments if those give your students good information and get them thinking about what they're good at, what they might like to do, great. There's also the Montana Career Information Systems website, which has extensive information about different jobs, what's required for school and training, and what kind of apprenticeship programs are out there. There's even online video of different jobs. So there's tons of information there. That's something else you could do for job exploration counseling. Maybe you're in a really rural area and there's not much industry there. What about figuring out people who've started their own businesses? What about going and interviewing those folks and seeing what it took to get their business going? What about looking at the possibility of self-employment as an option? So we can be really creative and custom tailor this to your students as well as to your community. Something that Abby Cooper is going to be doing a webinar on coming up is a group discovery class where students have assignments and they work on thinking about, well, based on, who I am at home, these are some skills and interests I've identified about myself. These are some learning strategies that I use or support strategies that my family uses with me. And it gets students to think about what would be their ideal conditions for employment. Like, all of us do better in certain situations than others. And as we work with students with disabilities, sometimes students have a narrower realm of where they would be successful and independent. And helping them figure that out and then identify careers and jobs that match that is going to be really helpful as they go forward looking at what is my pathway to work and to college. So for work-based learning, schools have done different rotations of jobs within school, and maybe your school hasn't had the resources to really develop a community-based program up to now. Think about using resources from the Pre-ETS TAC, but also from the Pre-ETS money to develop some experiences in the community. And if you have no idea how to do this, this would be a great time to call the TAC. And I'm going to give you contact information for all of us. We're also going to be doing some webinars. We have a webinar coming up that Roger Shelley from Red Lodge is going to do about work-based learning in rural areas. So this could include volunteer work. It could include internships or apprenticeships. If you don't know what's available in your area, it'd be great to connect with your local job service. Job service is another partner under WIOA. They have a lot of connections with employers, and they're working on developing opportunities for people to re-enter the workforce. And a lot of times, as schools, we haven't really connected with job service. This is a perfect time to look through your community and see who's available to help support growing the workforce in your area. This may look like it's just a school responsibility, but it's really not. This is a community responsibility. Employers are wanting to know that they're going to have access to qualified, skilled employees when they need them. So invite your parents who are employers, invite your local employers to help you identify ways to grow the workforce. They can come in as guest speakers, or you can go out and see what they're doing at their businesses. So for counseling on post-secondary education, several high schools are looking at creating some dual credit classes so that high school students with disabilities are also gaining college credits by taking a class that's based at the college, and it's giving them access to college, experience with college, And also the thought that maybe, wow, even though I'm a student with a disability, college is a valid outcome for me. And so it lets people look at all the potential opportunities. I heard from somebody yesterday in a Chamber of Commerce meeting that high school students with disabilities who leave high school with at least one college credit are far more likely to then enroll in post-secondary education and graduate from post-secondary education. So I hadn't heard that before and found that really fascinating. So, you know, part of activities that you can do here is you can research what kind of, like based on this career path that I'm interested in, what kind of education do I need? What schools in Montana or outside of Montana offer that type of training? What kind of services and supports are available to students with disabilities at those campuses where I might want to go? And what are the entrance requirements? What kind of GPA do I need? What kind of testing scores do I need? And how do I prepare myself as a student with a disability to go in and ask for what I need for accommodations? The other piece is that maybe students don't know what's out there for post-secondary education. It's not, again, it's not always a four-year university. It might be some of our local community colleges. It might be a trade school. There might be some apprenticeship programs. It might be accessing the Job Corps. There's a lot of different things out there. And there's a lot of different ways to access that. The other area under post-secondary education that we want to keep in mind is that students with intellectual disabilities are also accessing college. And the University of Montana, there's a couple groups there who are really interested in looking at developing a comprehensive transition program, which would be a certificate program for students with disabilities, and it would be college classes, some academic, some more skills related, probably work experience as well, where they would attend college as a college student, receive a certificate in the end, and but they would participate differently. And so that doesn't exist yet. There's a pilot program going on right now that Morgan Allwell and Jen Clausen have designed. But hopefully over the next couple of years there's going to be something here that that students with intellectual disabilities could access. So again, you can think of, you can either bring, to participate in these 5 areas, you can either bring guest speakers or connections into your classroom, and or go out to your community and look at what's out there for resources. And again, if you need help identifying these resources, please call the Technical Assistance Center. We'd be happy to help you. So for workplace readiness training, this might be teaching people how to look for jobs. You know, once you've helped students realize, well, this type of job isn't a very good job match for me, how do I go about identifying jobs that are open that would meet my qualifications and where I'd really do a good job? Or if I'm somebody who would really benefit from negotiating a job, how do we teach students how to do that? How do we teach them that they can go out and market themselves to employers maybe when there's not a job opening at all? And how do we teach them how to ask for accommodations? How do we teach them about, like, well, now that there's no school bus, or now that there's not going to be a school bus because you're going to be graduating, how do you get to and from work? And how do you make sure that you're doing that on time? Again, the job service has a lot of different classes around resume preparation, marketing yourself, career information systems. Also, the local HRDC, Human Resource Development Councils, are the WIOA programs for youth. They would have expertise in these areas as well. And again, small rural schools don't need to develop all the expertise. What we need to help you figure out is, how do you create resources within your school by tapping into what's available in your community and online to ensure that your students have access to these 5 pre-ETS activity areas. You know, another area might be counseling students and families about what happens to Social Security benefits when you go to work, to make sure that people truly understand that if they're receiving Medicaid, they can still keep their health insurance and may still be eligible for SSI and or SSDI, depending on what their benefits are when they go to work. The other place to look at, sorry, going back for a second, for various classes and education would be your local adult education or adult basic ed classes. There's tons of different classes on, you know, welding, computer skills, but also soft skills. So again, it doesn't all have to take place in the classroom. It could. Like you could incorporate some of this education and training into an English class, into a government class, wherever it fits. Or you can reach out to your community. So the 5th area of pre-ETS is instruction and self-advocacy. So how do you stand up for yourself? How do you disclose your disability? How do you talk about what you need for accommodations? How do you as a teenager start feeling comfortable with the fact that you have a disability? Right now, a lot of the independent living centers around Montana are reaching out to schools and offering support with transition planning, offering some mentoring around, you know, with peers with disabilities. There's some great resources out there. Also, there's tons of great information online about people with disabilities who are quite successful at college and in careers. So if you're in an area where maybe this is the only student with autism in your class and you want to, you know, introduce them to other folks who have a similar impact of disability who are super successful, look online. Look at some of the autism self-advocacy groups to connect them with. So look beyond what's available in your community and school. So a really big change with WIOA is that the focus is on competitive integrated employment as the outcome for everybody. So they, you know, schools can't use their pre-ETS money to subcontract for like sheltered workshop services. It's got to be focused on community employment. And also the law is really pushing all of us to look at making sure that we really look at community employment for people with more significant disabilities before we come to the conclusion that people can't work. So part of what we'll be offering through the TAC is training and information around how do you figure out what people's skills and abilities are and translate that into work tasks for kids who have really significant impacts of disability. What kind of assessments can we use for those kids that actually show us what they can do, not all the things they can't do? And then how do we negotiate with employers for a community-based experience? That's something that all of us would love to talk to schools about. But again, the focus is on community integrated employment for everybody. And so that means working in the community at prevailing wage or higher alongside people without disabilities. So that brings us to who is the TAC. So this is a collaborative partnership between Voca Rehab, Montana DPHHS, and the Roll Institute. We have a large team of people who are very excited to come out and work with you and help you however you need it. And our mission is to support schools in Voca Rehab to provide quality pre-employment transition services. The team, the Pre-ETS team, is currently looking at what other states are doing for WIOA and Pre-ETS. We're looking at resources that we think Montana schools and VR might need. We're developing curriculum. We are looking at organizing training based on requests from the community or needs that we're seeing. And we're also out there getting to know who the potential partnerships are in various regions of Montana so we can help schools in VR connect with those other potential partners. So we are a statewide team. The folks that are employed as Rural Institute staff are based in Conrad, Red Lodge, Miles City, Canada, and Missoula. So Kim Brown, you guys have known through some of the other transition activities. Teresa Baldry is working with us half-time. She also works with Pluck. Roger Shelley actually is working for the University of Alaska as well as for the Rural Institute. And Mary DiBiase also works for Montana Youth Transitions as well as the Rural Institute. We also contract with MSU Billings Center for Inclusive Education, which includes Marcia Sampson, John Keener, and Deb Miller. Good presence on the eastern side of the state as well. We also have several contractors. Abby Cooper is somebody who's very skilled with job development, financial literacy, benefits, workforce, employers, and she's based in Seattle, Washington, and will come to Montana intermittently and also provide assistance long distance to folks. And Isaac Baldry is somebody who also works for Montana Youth Transitions and is also available on contract to us for presentations, connections with students and classes, also some product and research development that he does. And also we're adding one more contractor, which is Mike Callahan out of Mark Golden Associates, who's going to be helping us develop some job coach training and ongoing curriculum for our state. So we've divided our state into various regions to make sure that we can be responsive to schools and Voc Rehab agencies out there. So for each of us that's responsible for a region, we are intending to participate on the Montana Youth Transition Regional Committees, gather information about resources in your area, connect with the schools and Voc Rehab counselors, and we'll help identify technical assistance and training needs within that region. That doesn't mean that each of us will be the only ones to provide technical assistance and training. So myself, I'm currently connected with Kalispell, Missoula, Hamilton, Helena, and Bozeman. Teresa Baldry is the geographic lead for Butte. Mary DiBiase is the geographic lead for the Great Falls area. John Keener is the lead for Havre and Miles City, and Deb Miller is Billings. So our goal is to maintain quarterly contact with those Voc Rehab offices and to connect with the schools in those areas at least quarterly. As we're getting more and more contracts really quickly, some of us are playing catch up. And so if you're a school that hasn't been contacted yet, feel free to zip us an email or a call and let's talk about what you need. So we've tried to brainstorm and be proactive about what we think you might need. But again, the TAC is responsive to what you're asking for in terms of pre-ETS and what you need. And you being schools, administrators, agencies that actually work with students in employment, and also Voc Rehab. So we're starting with some universal assistance, which would include the webinars, the information blasts, conference presentations, phone and email conversations, just responsive intervention to what you're asking for in terms of material. You know, we're basically putting together a brochure that talks about what pre-ETS is and what WIOA is, that will be available with a packet of information better explaining the pre-ETS process for schools and Voc Rehab counselors. We're just in the final edits of that right now. You know, based on all the questions we've gotten, we meaning Voc Rehab as well as the TAC, around what can we do with this money? What can we do for pre-ETS? How does this work? We've developed a question and answer product that will also be in that packet of information. In order for us to reach you, we are depending quite a bit on Voca Rehab counselors getting the information out to their schools, and also for people to join the listserv. That's going to be our main source of dissemination, in addition to the website, which is on the DPHHS Transition Services page. So we cannot add you to the listserv. You have to give us permission. So you have to go to the DPHHS website and click on Join the Listserv. We can't do it for you. So please get your colleagues on there. It's growing every day, but we're hoping to make that a very useful resource with up-to-date information on it for you. So in addition to the universal assistance, we're going to be providing some targeted technical assistance. Currently, we are organizing 3 job coach training events, which will be 3 days of on-site training and practical application. The first 2 sessions are going to be in Hamilton and Missoula. The 3rd session in July, and I'll give you dates in a minute, we don't have a venue for yet. It depends on what community wants it. Our thought is that if we get people really comfortable with job coaching and trained, we can get students out there working this summer. So if you would like to host a community, or if you're somebody who would like to participate in this but maybe you need some support to travel to Missoula or the Bitterroot, please zip us an email and we'll do what we can to support you. Also, we're thinking that there are going to be some common interests across communities and schools. What we'd like to do is identify various topics and set up some online learning communities. So maybe schools log in for an hour once a week to participate in a group discussion by webinar or by conference call, and we share resources, and then you do some implementation in your site, and then maybe have some one-to-one assistance with whoever the technical person is with that topic area. Again, if you know what you might like, or you just want to talk about what the possibilities are, give one of us a call. Because again, we're going to create the learning opportunities based on what we hear from you, you want and need. The other day, Corvallis identified they want some job development training and employer engagement strategies, and they want it this August. So we'll probably be putting something together again in the Bitterroot. But again, it depends, what do you want? Where do you want it? I'm just on this side of the state, but there's other folks out there who can help organize it from other sides of our state. We're also going to be offering an intensive level of service. So if a school says, we really want help identifying how to really build a focus on entrepreneurism in our rural community, we would like some on-site visits. We would like some ongoing long-distance technical assistance. We can create that for you. We have the resources right now to do that. So we're also looking at what kind of products do schools need. Right now, Mary DiBiase is taking a lead on looking at what Montana laws are around unpaid work experience. She's helping us identify resources out there from other states, and then as a team we'll be looking at how do we custom tailor that for Montana. We're also looking at, Roger Shelley will be taking the lead with developing some self-employment curriculum that schools can use. He's going to be hosting a self-employment webinar. Or actually, he's going to touch on self-employment, in a webinar on work-based learning in rural areas. We'll be developing some web resources as well. We're also looking at the need to develop some really good hands-on job coach curriculum. And I realize the 3-day trainings are going to be pretty time intensive, and that may not be an avenue for everybody. So another thing that Mary and Roger are looking at is how do we develop some 1-day trainings followed up with some long distance support. So that will be after we do some of the intensive trainings. Another thing that we're looking at is how do you incorporate work-based learning and pre-ETS into your IEPs? And again, how do we include all students? How do we include the students with significant impact of disability that we haven't served for a while in transition or in workplace readiness before? How do we look at the possibility of community employment for them now that we're not looking at the option of sheltered employment immediately? So as things come up, you have questions about where do I find this? Where do I look for this? I need something to give employers to talk about pre-ETS and to get them interested. Could you help me come up with a letter of introduction? That's something we can do as well. We also want to look at how do we explore the possibility of customized or negotiated employment for students that aren't going to compete well or for rural communities where there's not a lot of employment. How do we look at that issue and how do we as the TAC help you? So again, contact us. Some of the upcoming webinars are on April 14th, Work-Based Learning in Rural Communities. May 12th, Group Discovery as a classroom-based tool for learning about student skills, interests, and aptitudes. June 9th, what are soft skills? In July, Teresa Baldry is going to take the lead on helping parents think about employment for everybody. And in August, what are workforce agencies, what do they do, and why should schools contact them? And then in September, we'll be looking for resources around interest, aptitudes, and career guidance. So Kim's been adding some information here. Okay, so you have basically the website where you can join the listserv, and anything that we add to or anything that we develop for resources and technical assistance will be posted on that website. So, you know, as well, other things that we're looking at is how do we put together some information about looking at technology for work in college. And of course, we'll be doing that in conjunction with Montech, our assistive tech center here at the university at the Roll Institute. We'd like to put together a group discovery curriculum and maybe an online community around that after Abby does her webinar. And so this is my contact information. You also have everybody else's contact information there. And so I'm curious to know what are some questions that you guys have at this point?
And we have had a few questions come in, Ellen, and I just wanted to clarify one of the things that I typed into the chat box is that it doesn't look to me like the link to join the listserv is on the VR web page yet. That may still need to be added, or else I'm just not finding it. So
it's halfway down on the left.
Okay, thank you. And if you, for some reason, can't find it, you can also send me an email. And so I included my email address in the chat box and just say subscribe pre-ETS or something like that, and then I can get you added as well. So the first question that came in, Ellen, is, so schools can bill whom for these services?
Oh, they will bill Voca Rehab. And so as part of your contract with Voca Rehab, you will get, there's a very simple invoice that you fill out. You basically identify, you can do it anonymously so you're not breaking HIPAA regulations or FERPA regulations. Basically identify your students by student ID or initials, and then for the quarter you basically state which of the 5 pre-ETS you provided for them. Then what you do is you add up how many students you served in the quarter, and you look at the fee scale and say you've got 9. Basically there's a fee scale for 5 to 10 students. You invoice for this much for the quarter.
Okay. Next question, is the pre-ETS funded through a grant or is it using existing dollars?
Basically it's 15% of Voca Rehab's existing budget. This is not a grant. This is basically where this money is coming from, is that the feds have directed all state Voc Rehab agencies to redirect their existing funding. So this isn't, you know, I know people are really concerned that this is a one-time funding. They're going to start building this capacity and then the funding's going away. That's not the case. This reauthorization of the Rehab Act was 2014. The last one was in '78. Like Pre-ETS and WEO are going to be around for quite a while. And Voc Rehab is committed to putting money out there to the schools.
Okay. Next question, can I get a copy of the recorded webinar? And we can't email out recordings of the webinar because they're huge files, but it will be posted somewhere on the VR Transition Services webpage. We just don't have the exact location yet. But when we know that, we will send it out to all of the Pre-ETS mailing list members. So if you have not already joined the mailing list, be sure to do that if you want updated information and if you want to know when the archives are available. And one of the questions when you registered for today's webinar was whether or not you wanted to join the Pre-ETS mailing list. If you said yes there, then we will get you added. You don't need to do anything more to join the listserv. And the next question is sort of along those same lines. Where is a direct link to the DPHHS listserv website? In your chat box, I put the Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services Transition Pages link. And if you visit there, Ellen said it's about halfway down the page if you want to click to join the listserv. Otherwise, again, you can send me an email and I can get you added that way. The next question, I am attending from Casper, Wyoming. Is there a possibility of continuing to be involved in some of the more intensive, specific tax services you are putting in place?
Sure. You know, you can always listen into the webinars and, you know, visit the DPHHS website as we put things together. So, you know, all of our information through these webinars, it's different from our transition employment projects because this project is geared totally at Montana. However, I'm sure there's things that you can share with us from Wyoming that have been developed, and we're happy to have you sit in on these calls as well.
Okay, next question, where can we access copies of the contracts, rates, etc.?
If you email me, I can send you that, or it may be more appropriate to contact your local Voc Rehab office because typically it's going to be the Voc Rehab counselor supervisor who makes the first contact with schools. And so if you're not sure who that is, we can share that with you.
Okay, next question, can we see a sample for invoicing?
Yes. And again, Kim, can we post things after the fact? So could we post a copy of the contract? Or actually, I bet they're on the Rehab website. There is, and I'm kind of looking, I know there's a couple of rehab counselors on here, but I'm thinking on DPHHS's website, there is a link that's says contracts for schools. So if you go to the website, all of that should be there. If it's not easy to find, email me and I will send them to you.
Okay. Next question, what and when are the 3-day training sessions in Missoula?
Okay, those are June 15th to 17th will be in Missoula. June 20th to 22nd will be in the Bitterroot. And then the third one is July 13th to 15th. And so that's open. So if you would want something in your community, we're hoping to have it very far from Missoula, because that would be fair. And also these are things that we can also have more of these trainings scheduled in September and next year as well. But if you're interested and say you're up in Kalispell or Columbia Falls and your school doesn't have money to support you to come down to Missoula, give me an email and we'll see what we can do to help you get here.
Okay, next question. Are the Pre-ETS students already determined eligible for VR services prior to the contract billing?
No, not necessarily. And students can go through the eligibility determination process and have an IPE at the same time they're receiving Pre-ETS services, but students don't need to be enrolled with Voca Rehab to qualify for Pre-ETS services and for the school to bill for them. Again, I see Brooke and Anna on the webinar. If you guys want to clarify or add anything from VR, please do so.
Okay, next question. On our quarterly reporting to VR, do we report and bill on just students that participated for that quarter? More specifically, will our billing numbers vary depending on what is going on that quarter and how many students are participating that specific quarter?
They could, and I guess what we're hoping is that schools will identify more and more students and be offering more Pre-ETS activities. And also the goal of the Pre-ETS activities is not to be a one-time event at the school. Like instead of saying we're going to go visit job service once a quarter, instead what we'd like you to do is explore employment options in your community throughout the quarter. So maybe going to job service is one event that happens as part of that activity.
Okay, and Anna just shared the website URL for the contracting page on the VRBS website. So I just put that into the chat box. Thank you very much, Anna, for sharing that.
Oh, and I just thought of another training opportunity now that Anna spoke up. We're basically going to be in Billings on April 7th. And this is a training that Roger and Abby are going to be doing, and this is open to anybody. We still have room. It's the Thursday, April 7th from 8:30 to 12:30 in the MSU training room, and it's going to be on creating access to Pre-ETS for students with the most significant needs. So thinking about how do we think about employment for kids with significant disabilities, how do we assess interests and abilities? How do we look at community-based work experience for them? And then in the afternoon, we're just going to have a networking session where people can talk about whatever's on their mind and what they need. And that can be, it's going to be kind of an informal session with lunch provided if people would like to attend that. And again, that's April 7th in Billings. And on the way to Billings, Abby and I and Teresa and Isaac and other TAC members, if they would like to join us, we will be in Butte on April 5th from 10 to 12, and right now that's going to be at the VR office, and we're just going to hold a community meeting to hear from all of you about what do you want from the TAC, what are your needs, what kind of training things do you need, how are things going. Let's get to meet some people in your community. We will be in Helena the afternoon of the 5th from 2 to 4. And in Helena, we are going to be, I'm blanking now. We are going to be at the MILP office space, the Montana Independent Living Project office space. I'm trying to schedule a meeting for Bozeman on April 6th in the morning from 9 to 11. I do not have a space yet. I'm trying to track that down. And then we'll be at Billings VR from 2 to 4, April 6th in the afternoon. So if you want any more information about that, give me a call or email.
Okay. Next question. Can the employment activities be limited to certain populations, say students in school-based mental health programs that may not have a special education program or case manager?
Yeah, as long as they have a disability and may qualify for VR services later on, they also qualify for Pre-ETS.
And so is it okay to have the employment activity specific to, say, a group of students who have a mental health related disability?
Oh, I see what you're asking. Okay. Yeah, services can be delivered to groups of students. So if you're working with that group of students who all have disabilities for some maybe work readiness, self-advocacy, we'd also like to see you going out in the community as well and doing some more individualized, inclusive services. But yes, some of those activities may be delivered in a group of students who all have disabilities.
Other questions or comments from any of our audience members? This is a great chance. You have Ellen one-on-one. She's captive right now.
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions about has your school started a contract, who they need to talk to, this would be a good time to ask.
Okay, now they're starting to come back in. Can we set something up in Whitefish?
Yes. Yes, is this Christian?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, yes, I need to get to Whitefish. What do you want to set up? A meeting or actually why don't we touch base afterwards and let's set a date? Because I definitely need to head north.
And Christian says that of course the Flathead schools would be invited as well.
Oh, so you're thinking about training. Yeah. Yeah, we can do, that would be great. Yes, let's set something up. Let's talk after this.
And Christian says a training like what you're doing in Hamilton sounds good.
Okay. Okay.
Next question, has this been shared nationally? And I'm not sure if the question is asking about this training specifically or about Pre-ETS in general. So the person who asked that question, could you send a little bit more information about what you're asking? And then while we're waiting for that, hello Ellen, this is Lindsay from Missoula VR. I'm not sure if you're able to answer this question, but do you see school districts being mandated to do Pre-ETS?
No, I don't see it. No, because Pre-ETS is mandated by WIOA, which directs folk rehab. The schools basically are following their legislation. Schools need to do transition planning for kids with disabilities, and they need to do age-appropriate transition assessments that direct post-school outcomes, and then services related or services and activities need to be provided that help schools or help students with disabilities get from where they currently are based on the assessment to where they'd like to be post-school. So schools have similar legislation or similar legal direction, but it's not pre-ETS. And I think some of the schools, I had some great feedback from Karen Allen and some folks from Missoula Public Schools yesterday at a chamber meeting where, you know, their perspective is, wait a minute, you're coming in and asking us to do this and we're a little leery of you. And so we do acknowledge that this is going to take a while for schools in Voc Rehab to figure out how to make this work for kids. I think everybody's got the same goal in mind of making sure that our students with disabilities are better prepared and, you know, have better post-school outcomes. So kids aren't sitting at home on the couch after school, that they're going to work, they're going to college, and they're competent. So no, pre-ETS is definitely not going to be mandated by schools because it's not their law. What we're hoping is that with this incentive, this cash incentive and support being offered to schools, that we can work collaboratively to implement pre-ETS for students. Because I think there's a lot of stuff that schools have wanted to do but haven't had all the funding to do it.
And Doug Doty has typed in and says, Doug Doty says no. This is part of the challenge of only being able to use chat, as it makes the conversations a bit more disjointed, but there's a no from Doug Doty. Lisa Pate says, great to see you, by the way. And then a clarification on the question, has this been shared nationally? The questioner means about pre-ETS in general.
Oh yeah, this is pre-ETS is written into WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So this is a national initiative. This isn't a Montana thing. How Montana is choosing to spend their 15% by offering schools contracts, that's the unique piece to Montana. And also to funding the Technical Assistance Center, that's unique to Montana. But pre-ETS is national.
The Quality Life Concepts folks in Great Falls would like the team to consider Great Falls for the training sessions, as we are centrally located and have a lot of rural access.
Excellent, okay.
Next question, is there anything that special education cooperatives serving member school districts should be doing to support this in the schools? Thus far, the information and contracts have been with each individual school.
Oh, and is that Tim Miller?
No, that's Jenny.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, you know, several of us have reached out to co-ops because I think that some of the co-ops are very, very active in transition and supporting some of their smaller schools around transition and work-based learning. And so we see them as a way to help us connect with the schools and identify resource and training needs. Currently, Voc Rehab is not contracting with co-ops. They've chosen to contract with the local schools instead. So we would love to connect with co-ops and tell us how we can help you and how you can help the local schools. The schools could choose to use their pre-ETS money to say to a co-op, we'd like you to take the lead on developing the expertise and program around work-based learning, and you could get several of your smaller schools pooling their pre-ETS dollars to do that. However, at this point, Voc Rehab isn't in the position to contract with the co-ops.
And Ellen, Anna has written in and confirmed that VRBS is not going to contract with the co-ops directly. The co-ops can facilitate contact with VR and the Technical Assistance Center.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, next question or comment. I also think that there will need to be further training, information sharing on the legal content of the contracts. Whitefish schools spent a considerable amount of time looking into the lengthy legal and insurance pieces of the contract. We ended up changing sections to meet our district needs, and I'm sure that these contracts will change in the future as other schools across the nation determine what they are comfortable in signing. Do you see these contracts being simplified or significantly changed in the future?
That would be a question for VR central office. So the answer to that is I don't know, and that wouldn't be the TAC call. That would be VR central office.
Okay, and thank you. Okay, and a clarification on the question about the Pre-ETS being national. The questioner says, thank you. I meant the unique way that Montana is providing these Pre-ETS. I'm aware of WIOA and that it's national and not a state initiative. Anna suggests on the question about the contracts and the legal language in there, suggests contacting Tammy Hogan at VRBS about that question. Next question, in Montana, were the contents of the contracts negotiated at the state level as part of the MOU, or how did they come into being?
That would be another question for central office.
Okay.
And Tammy is the VR counselor who's in charge of, who's taking the lead on the Pre-ETS initiative. And some of those, that's pretty new to her. So people's positions have changed a little bit around the state. So yeah, that's something that she might be able to answer, or that would be Peggy Williams and Jim Marks.
Okay. And Anna's written in that the contract language is standardized state of Montana contractual language.
Okay, thanks, Anna.
Other questions for Ellen about the Technical Assistance Center, about any of the upcoming technical assistance activities, any other kinds of technical assistance that you or your school might need? Sorry, here's one more comment, and I don't know, this may be another one that needs to go to central office. Do we know the VR rationale for why it will not contract with co-ops? It seems like an important thing to consider to support the access of this program in rural areas.
I'm stalling to see if Anna wants to answer that. Because I'm not quite sure.
Anna's answer is to contact central office.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. And also on your evaluations, there will be an area where you can make suggestions about additional training or resources that you're looking for from us. So if you don't want to type it in, feel free to add things on the evaluations, and Kim takes those very seriously. She keeps them for a year, and that's how we prioritize our next trainings. So we do read them and we do pay attention to them.
One comment that came in from Teresa, just a reminder that the Technical Assistance Center will also be sharing with schools activities that are being done in other schools that are working well. Do you want to talk about that at all, Ellen?
Sure. Yeah, as we're out there learning what all of you are doing, it's great for us to be able to share that with other schools. Kim is going to be putting together an electronic dissemination, which will go out through the listserv. And so we're going to showcase what different schools are doing to give schools different ideas. Also, what we're doing in the Missoula area, VR and the TAC are meeting with schools together so they can share resources and information. I'd also like to get that going in the Bitterroot, and then we'll have to figure out if there's a couple different locations up the Mission Valley and Flathead where we could group schools together so that you can share some ideas and resources and information. Because I think none of us know all the different ways that we can do this. We're all just learning and looking for more information, and so we need to share it.
We did have another question come in, Ellen. Are you doing any other trainings that are focused on other stakeholder groups, such as employers or other types of service providers?
Actually, our focus of the TAC is really on pre-ETS and students. And so as long as those service providers, such as the community rehab programs, are doing employment for students or supporting the schools to do some work-based learning, then we include them in our trainings. But the whole focus and funding and directive of the TAC is on students. So we've got to keep that in mind. We are going to be we've been doing outreach to job service and workforce, and so there's going to be some training about those groups. And if they're working with students at all in pre-ETS, they're welcome to attend our trainings. We did have a great suggestion yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce meeting to do some training and outreach to employers around how pre-ETS can be a huge benefit for them. And so we talked about maybe organizing a symposium, and I'm thinking this is going to be like 6 to 12 months off, for employers, and workforce and the Chamber are willing to help us do that in this area. But it would be great to talk to employers about, you know, how folks with all realms of disability could impact them, what negotiated employment means, how they could be involved in their local schools to help build their own workforce, because this isn't a school issue and it's not a VR issue, this is a community issue. So that could be a really cool training opportunity that we'll start looking at planning.
I don't see any other questions coming in right now. And I do have just a couple housekeeping things, Ellen, when you're done making your closing remarks.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for your interest and your patience as we get this together. We know things are changing as we figure it out, so keep asking questions, keep telling us what you need, and State VR as well as the regional areas as well as the TAC we're really invested in pre-ETS and really want it to be a good thing for students and for schools. So tell us what you need and we will do our best to meet those needs.
Great, thank you. And thanks to all of you. Please do remember to fill out the survey that pops up on your screen when the webinar ends. And as Ellen mentioned earlier during her presentation, the next webinar is Work-Based Learning in Rural Communities. That will take place on April 14th from 10:30 to 12 o'clock Mountain Time. And the flyer and registration information has already gone out to the pre-ETS mailing list members. If you did not receive that because you just joined the mailing list, you can send me an email and let me know. Otherwise, a reminder will be going out in a week or so. And so when you get the reminder, you can register at that time. The recording for today's webinar will be posted to the VRBS website at some point. We're still kind of figuring out where exactly it will be housed, so we will let the mailing list members know as soon as the archived version is available. And we want to thank all of you who spent time today to attend this presentation. We want to thank all of you who asked questions and made comments. Really helpful. We've captured the questions that you asked so we can keep track of what kinds of information people need and want. And thank you, Ellen, for your great information today and your wonderful presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.